time-honored system is being tested by rapid change, and our government recognizes that if we want to maintain our world-class education system, our approach has to change just as quickly. The Aggression and Complexity Action Team made 7 recommendations for addressing this issue, ranging from policy changes to support measures. It was clear that the scale of the challenge, as well as the urgency of the solutions, was going to need cabinet-level leadership to move this work forward. We recognize that our top priority would need to be directing more resources to address large class sizes and class complexity, and that we would need to have the clearest possible picture of this issue. And that's why our government stood up a Class Size and Complexity Cabinet Committee back in November with the aim of turning the recommendations into concrete actions. We've used the Cabinet Committee model for addressing other issues of urgent concern here in Alberta. Most recently, the encampments and the Navigation Centre came out of that process. It's highly effective in driving real change quickly. Along with numerous cabinet members and education leaders, the committee also includes representation from the Alberta Teachers Association to ensure that all important frontline perspective is reflected in our work. Our mandate includes gathering and analyzing class size and complexity data from school boards around the province so that we can figure out which parts of the system to direct additional resources to. And when we announced the committee in November, we committed to quick and decisive action on this pressing issue. And today, just over 3 months later, we're delivering on that commitment. We now have the most comprehensive set of class size and complexity data ever collected in Alberta. And this data tells us that class sizes are significantly higher in some areas than others, with the provincial average of about 25 students. It also shows that complexity is widespread in Alberta's school system. The numbers tell us that pressure in schools is coming from the combined impacts of these two factors. But rising complexity and behavioral incidents are putting the greatest pressure on classrooms. I do want to thank school authorities for acting so quickly to provide the data. Their swift response yielded a truly unprecedented amount of information, and we analyzed data from 89,000 classrooms across Alberta. This analysis enabled us to pinpoint exactly where to direct additional resources so it will have the most impact. We identified which schools and which classrooms most needed support. The committee also considered how to allocate funding to support these classrooms identified as the most in need. And we wanted to ensure resources were allocated into specific schools, but still maintain local decision-making for school authorities on how best to do that. An idea was planted with me last fall by a school teacher in my constituency who was also a former town councillor in Brooks and happened to be the daughter of my opponent in the last provincial election. She suggested that we look at the Saskatchewan model and how they've been able to embed specialized teams made of teachers, EAs, and other professionals into schools around the province to supplement the work of teachers and EAs in assigned classrooms. The committee was honoured to have Saskatchewan's Minister of Education, the Honourable Everett Hindley, present to us, and we've taken what we've learned and look forward to implementing those learnings here in Alberta. And now I'm pleased to announce today that our government is investing $143 million to help our youngest and most vulnerable students in kindergarten to grade 6 in schools with the highest complexity. This will support the creation of up to 476 complexity teams, each one made up of 1 teacher and 2 education assistants that will be deployed to high complexity classrooms across the province to provide teachers with more support and students with more one-on-one attention. And this is only the beginning. The Class Size and Complexity Cabinet Committee will continue to analyze the data, work with our partners, and bring forward recommendations for longer-term actions that will support and strengthen Alberta's school system. Our message to teachers and to school administrators is this: we have heard you, we're here for you, and help is on the way. We want you back doing what you do best, teaching, providing leadership, and shaping the next generation of young Albertans in one of the world's top-ranking school systems. Thank you, and I'd now turn it over to Minister Nicolaides to share more details about today's funding announcement.
Well, thank you very much, Premier. Of course, over the past year, one message has come through loud and clear, that classrooms are becoming more complex. We've also heard this theme through the teacher strike last fall and during the telephone town hall the Premier and I had with teachers in December. We know, of course, that this reality won't change overnight, but we also know that action is needed now. And today, I want to speak more about how we are responding. To take meaningful action, we first needed a clearer understanding of what's happening inside Alberta classrooms. And so, In November, I directed school boards to begin one of the largest data gathering exercises ever in our education system. And that's why, throughout November, we worked closely with school boards to collect detailed data on class sizes, classroom composition, and the occurrence of complex needs. The response was outstanding. We now have data from more than 1,500 schools representing nearly 89,000 classrooms. This is the most comprehensive picture of Alberta's classrooms that has ever been collected, and it's the first time that data has been collected down to the classroom level. And what the data shows us is important, not only for government, but for every Albertan who cares about student success. Today, I want to walk you through how the data we collected was used to determine our response. And my main message to Albertans today is this: your government is tackling the complexity challenge head-on. Let me now walk you through some of the key data points. Since November, we've assessed data from more than 89,000 classrooms across 3 key measures: class size, composition, and occurrence of complexity needs and behaviors. The overall data confirms that overall class size in Alberta appears relatively in good shape, with, of course, areas for improvement. For example, 79% of all K-3 classrooms have less than 25 students, and 65% of all K-6 classrooms have less than 25 students. Furthermore, only 1% of all reported classrooms over 30 are in our K-3 environment. In fact, 91% of all classrooms over 30 are in grades 7 to 12. As you can see on the slide, average class sizes across Alberta are at reasonable levels. We also know that class size alone is not the driving factor of pressure in schools. It is just one of the factors contributing to overall challenges in the classroom. It is a reality that classes across every region, grade level, and school type have complexity factors. The range and intensity of student needs are all contributing factors to complexity, and many classrooms are experiencing several of these factors at one time. Complexity is a system-wide challenge, not isolated to specific communities or programs. To address these challenges, as Premier has mentioned, we are investing a total of $143 million in targeted supports to make a meaningful difference where classroom complexity is the highest. Of this, $129 million is directed to schools that have been identified as the most complex in the province, and $14 million will go to schools with unique complexity challenges that may require different or additional strategies. Early intervention can change a student's entire learning trajectory, and this funding ensures that students who need support receive it at this stage of their education when it has the greatest impact. Through today's investment, up to 476 new complexity teams will be deployed in K-6 schools across Alberta. Each team, as the Premier noted, will include 1 teacher and 2 EAs that will provide direct, hands-on support at the school level. These teams will go where data shows they can make the biggest difference. In classrooms where the highest complexity based on measures of class size, composition, and student needs. Complexity teams will work to support the diverse needs of students, including academic, behavioral, social, emotional, or other. This can include, for example, helping students learn English, managing disruptive students, or helping gifted students with more enrichment. These teams will provide in-class assistance to teachers. Early intervention and foundational stability are the primary benefits of placing complexity teams in K-6 schools. Research indicates that addressing student needs during the formative K-6 years is more effective and less costly than attempting to remediate behavioral or academic gaps in secondary school. By integrating these teams directly into elementary environments, schools can identify challenges at the earliest possible stage, preventing minor delays from becoming permanent learning barriers. I'm confident that this investment will support our teachers as they manage diverse needs while strengthening student outcomes in our schools. We know classrooms will continue to evolve, and because of this, we will continue to gather data to maintain a full and accurate understanding of the challenges our schools are facing. This initial investment today is only the first part of our plan to address complexity. The Class Size and Complexity Cabinet Committee will assess more data in the future to ensure investments and supports remain targeted and meaningful. The new data provides a clear understanding of where supports are most needed, and government's response reflects that evidence by funding the most needed and highly complex classrooms right now. But we also know complexity exists in every region, every school type, and every grade level. Once this phase is complete, we will implement additional solutions and allocate resources to more classrooms across the province. This will be done using a phased approach, with the most complex classrooms receiving supports first. We will also continue to deliver on our commitments in Bill 2 to hire 3,000 new teachers over 3 years, and our $300 million commitment to hire 1,500 new EAs. By targeting funding to our most complex classrooms and focusing on youngest students, we're hopeful that this will relieve some of the pressure in our classrooms and improve the daily experience of students and teachers across the province. As you can see, our government is tackling the complexity challenge head-on. And I'd like to thank our school boards for their hard work last fall to collect and bring forward this data. I also want to take a moment to thank the committee members and standing guests and share a message with them. Your thoughtful comments, constructive feedback, and innovative ideas have greatly enriched our debate and helped guide the steps that we've announced today. I look forward to our continued work on this important issue in the months ahead. As we move forward, we will continue to support school boards as they deploy these teams, and I encourage all Albertans to view the full data set on alberta.ca to better understand the realities inside of our classrooms. It's now my privilege to invite Lynette Anderson, Superintendent and CEO of Edmonton Catholic Schools, to provide her remarks.
Thank you. I want to begin by acknowledging the province's funding announcement and the formal recognition it brings to the realities that schools are experiencing across Alberta. The data-informed approach confirms and responds to these realities. Complexity is increasing in our classrooms, across all grade levels and in all schools. Supporting classroom teachers is a priority for Edmonton Catholic Schools. Our focus is on practical classroom-based supports, including planning, strategies, and hands-on assistance that helps teachers do what they do best. The Classroom Complexity Team model will help support teaching and learning. The complexity teams will provide immediate and much-needed relief to teacher workload intensity. The teams will support classroom aggression and safety issues, and they will improve student and staff well-being. As Alberta's population increases, classroom demands will also increase, and it is therefore critical that educators and support staff have the resources, training, and supports they need to work safely and sustainably. Each school community is different, and the ability for school authorities to adjust supports based on student needs allows us to be more responsive and thereby more efficient at improving classroom conditions and student outcomes. We value the continued commitment of Alberta Education and Childcare to collaborate with school authorities on funding that reflects changing realities and supports sustainable long-term solutions. And I will now invite Nicole Buchanan, Board Chair of Red Deer Public.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I want to begin by acknowledging Premier Smith, Minister Nicolaides, and the Government of Alberta, as well as the Class Size and Complexity Cabinet Committee, for their continued focus on addressing class size and complexity in our classrooms. Today's announcement reflects the reality we've been hearing for some time, and is the first step in being responsive to what is being heard. Classrooms today are more complex than they have ever been before. Teachers are supporting students with diverse learning needs, behavioral challenges, and social and emotional challenges and pressures, often all at the same time in the classroom. Students themselves are telling us they feel the complexity as well. They want classrooms where learning can happen, where expectations are clear, and where everyone has the support they need to succeed. The data released through this work confirms that this is not isolated to one school or one community. Classroom complexity is being experienced across Alberta, and addressing it requires thoughtful, evidence-based action. That is why today's investment matters. The addition of complexity teams, teachers, and educational assistants working directly in classrooms provides immediate, practical support where it is needed most, particularly in the early years. When classrooms are better supported, teachers are better able to focus on instruction. Teachers and students receive the attention they need, and learning environments become safer and more productive for everyone. The resources need to follow need, and supports must be flexible enough to respond to the realities inside classrooms. Today's announcement moves us in that direction. I also want to acknowledge that this is an important first step. Addressing class size and complexity is ongoing work, and continued collaboration between government and school authorities will be essential as longer-term solutions are developed. This is about getting the right supports into classrooms so teachers can teach and students can learn. Thank you, and at this time, I would hand it over to the press secretary for a Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you to our speakers. We'll now go into our media Q&A. We'll be starting off with questions here in the room before making our way to the phones. Reminder, we'll be taking one question and one follow-up. And please state your name and outlet before asking your question. With that, we'll go ahead to our first at the mic.
Hi, Jackie with CTV. We were talking about the teams, so there's 3 people in each team. That's almost 1,500 people that need to get hired. Can you talk to me a little bit about the hiring process and how that's going to affect when it can be implemented in schools?
Yeah, of course. Ultimately, hiring processes and decisions are made by the school authorities directly, so the provincial government is not directly involved. We, of course, will be releasing this funding immediately so that school divisions can get underway with the hiring process. We do recognize it's late in the year, and there may be some challenges, but we have to move forward. And we're always standing ready to help our school boards in whatever way that we can to assist them.
The second question is, I think a lot of people are going to be shocked to hear that average classroom size stat of 25. What have you been hearing, or what is your reaction when you first saw that number? Is it lower than you thought? Because we've heard from teachers, throughout the strike, they were talking about these massive numbers. So how did you react?
Yeah, we have heard, of course, a lot of anecdotal information about significantly large class sizes, and there's no question that they exist. We do have some large class sizes out there that we need to address, but when we do take that look and that picture overall, we do see that the numbers are relatively reasonable. Again, recognizing that it may be more pronounced in some centers versus others, but I'm encouraged, especially with the significant influx of population increase that we've had over the past little bit. I am encouraged, and I know that with our efforts, we'll continue to address some of the core challenges, which we've seen from the data. There's an important conversation between class size and complexity. And that's one of the things that we have heard a lot of, and I wasn't too surprised at with the data. We have heard a lot of concern from teachers about rising complexity, and the data validates that. And that really helped the committee to pinpoint these resources and our approach to address complexity versus just a class size, because you could have a class size of 22 or 23, but have significant complexity within that class, and you're still going to have challenges. So that was one of the primary reasons why we decided to take the approach of directing our supports towards the complexity issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Go ahead.
Hi, folks. Skylar Peters with Global News in Calgary. A couple questions about the teams themselves. Firstly, you talked a little bit about the supports that they'll be receiving. Presumably, some of these teachers being new hires might be their first job in a school after the school they went to, or maybe their first in a specific school division or in Alberta. Can you just talk about how they will be supported and they will be set up for success, given the fact that they're stepping into an era where there has been some chronic underfunding, and we've reached a point where this action had to be taken?
Yeah, well, of course, they'll continue to be supported as we continue to move forward on our other commitments. I mentioned Bill 2 and our commitment to hire 3,000 teachers and 1,500 EAs. So we're continuing to work towards filling those requirements, and they'll continue to be supported through that additional staffing as well. I know many school divisions have resources that they have dispatched to schools to help students learn English and help with other complexity issues, so they'll be augmented and supplemented by that staff as well.
And I know you mentioned the effectiveness of, using these teams on some of the younger grades, K to 6, at least in the beginning. Parents of students who are older than that, of course, might feel a little bit left out. Is there a message to them? Maybe more help is on the way. I know Budget 2026 is coming. And also, what are your thoughts on just providing that help at the earlier stage when there are kids out there, grades 10, 11, 12, the clock is ticking towards, post-secondary schooling, entering, the workforce, things like that, and there's kind of less time to help them out.
Yeah, and of course, the committee evaluated those different options. I would say to students and families of junior high and high school students that, you're on the list. We know that there's more work that needs to be done. We know that there is complexity. There are complexity issues in junior high and high school, and so the committee will continue its work and will continue to look at addressing those areas. Continue to stay tuned as the committee continues its work. To your other comment, indeed, we believed it was critically important to focus on our elementary school age students so that we can identify challenges early and address them early as well, so that students have, of course, every opportunity to succeed.
Thanks.
Tyson Fedor with CTV. A little off topic here, but I just kind of want to address the Tumbler Ridge incident for either the minister or the premier. Alberta RCMP have received several reports over the last couple of days just in regards to people potentially showing up at schools in the province with weapons, firearms. They have been unsubstantiated. The most recent this morning in High River. I guess what's the message to parents, teachers, students in this time of heightened anxiety when it comes to what we saw in BC? Sure.
Well, first and foremost, of course, my heart goes out to the community, to the individuals, to the families, to the neighbors that have been affected by this incredibly unimaginable circumstance. I have sent a note to my counterpart in British Columbia. I don't anticipate there's much that I can do, but just to ensure that that she knows that there's open lines of communication, and if there is anything that we can do to help, that we're there, we're standing at the ready. My message to families and to students would be a message of reassurance. Our schools are safe, and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids go to school every day in incredibly safe environments. Of course, what we've seen warrants us to undertake a review. So I will be asking school boards to undertake an audit of their security measures to make sure that all doors are locking properly as they should, intercoms are working as they should, safety equipment is where it needs to be and updated. At the same time, I'll also be conducting an audit of provincial standards with respect to security measures, to make sure that we have adequate minimum standards for our school divisions and evaluate whether those minimum standards need to be elevated or updated. And lastly, I'll also be connecting with Minister Ellis in, of course, public safety to make sure that any updates that we provide are in alignment with latest public safety and security measures and protocols.
Did the Premier have anything to add, if you wanted to?
Well, just that we were talking because Nicole Buchanan is a student resource officer, or school resource officer, and that may also factor into some of the decisions that we have to make. Yeah, Nicole was also saying that at certain schools, they have a key code access or a swipe access, and so those are the kind of things that the minister's going to look at to see if there's a need to elevate that level of security at the schools. I reached out to my counterpart, David Eby, in this unspeakable tragedy. I just can't imagine what the community is going through, and as Premier, what he's going through as he's managing the fallout of it. We did send a STARS helicopter to the scene and we had trauma units set up at Grand Prairie Hospital, which was the closest major regional hospital, as well as the Stollery if needed. Sadly, they weren't needed. But we also have I let him know that we do whatever we need to if he needs additional resources for mental health support or grief counseling. But it's just an unspeakable tragedy.
Mm-hmm. And Premier, just to follow up in regards to, I guess, this morning QP released in regards to healthcare, just a petition about 8,000 stories they've heard from Albertans wait times in the emergency room department. I guess what's maybe your response to this petition, this website that they've set up about stories in the ER and where the state of healthcare in this province is?
We need to hear about it. I mean, every time we uncover a new problem, we solve it. We knew that we had a problem of people not being connected to family doctors, so we created a new doctor model. We now have 841 doctors who are accepting new patients, mostly in Calgary and Edmonton. We developed a nurse practitioner model, so we now have nearly 100 nurse practitioners who are also out there doing service. We've massively updated our health records because we heard that people wanted their information all in one place. So we did some big updates at the beginning of February to make sure that all of the data on labs and procedures and diagnostics are in one spot so that people can share that with their family practitioner. We've massively increased surgeries. Through charter surgical centers, we went from 40,000 done in those facilities to over 65,000. We're on track to have a record number of surgeries this year, I think 358,000. But there's no question more work needs to be done on the first point of access people have going into emergency room, and making sure that emergency treatment beds aren't filled with patients waiting to get a bed on a higher floor. So we have a regular meeting of our agency heads where there are two main projects that we've been working on right now. One is the movement of alternative level of care patients into community beds so that they aren't in acute care beds. We've been very successful in moving those out. I'll have more to say about that with an announcement next week with Jason Nixon, our Assisted Living and Social Services Minister. But then the next big step is figuring out the patient flow, is making sure that people aren't parked in emergency treatment beds, that there are open beds so that if somebody needs to be an inpatient, that they're moved along. And that will change the experience people have in the emergency room. That'll change the experience people have when they're dropped off by an ambulance or when they're dropped off by a loved one. But it is the top priority for our government to address that main piece.
Go ahead.
All right, this is Arzuma with Radio Canada, to be for any of you. The data that we reviewed this morning show that the government identified about 655 schools across Alberta with high priority classrooms, yet today's announcement only funds 476. So how did you determine which, 179 high school should be excluded from these funds?
Well, I would look at it maybe a little bit differently. I mean, one of the things that Saskatchewan did as a pilot when they first brought it in, they had 8 classrooms and 8 teams. And it was so successful that I believe this past year they've increased it to 30, and next year they're increasing it to 50. And so we just felt like, having seen the success and heard the stories in Saskatchewan, that we didn't want a slow scale up, we wanted a quick scale up. And so these are dollars that are available for us from the 2025 budget. 2026 budget will be announced at the end of February. And as the minister has said, that there will be more prioritized spending at that time. We released the budget in the last week of February, but we knew we had to get started. And one of the things I would say is that the minister has committed that the teams that are hired this year will also carry over to next year. So the additional resources will augment what we've announced today. But did you want to comment on any further on how you determined the teams? I mean, the big issue when we looked at complexity was, we have 3 different tranches. We've got those that are relatively low complexity, that have 0 to 4 kids who might have English language learning, behavioral, or gifted or some other kind of special need. And then we've got classrooms that are moderate, so those are sort of 5 to 10. Or 5 to 9 kids in a classroom that are characterized by having those special needs. Highly complex ones have 10 or more in a classroom. And so that was really one of the defining factors, is if you've got 10 or more kids in a classroom who are English language learners or have medical needs or toileting needs or behavioral needs, that was the highest priority that we had. Make sense?
Yeah, maybe quickly. Yeah, just on the question of prioritization, we, as I mentioned, we looked at class size, we looked at complexity or composition. So, are there students that speak English as an additional language, have severe disabilities, mild disabilities? And then we looked at the occurrence rate, because of course you may have one specifically identified issue of complexity, but it may occur 10 different times in the classroom. And then we looked at the occurrence rate, the composition rate, and the class size level to prioritize the schools and then, of course, distributed the funding to the highest priority schools. And as the Premier has noted, we'll have more to say with Budget 26, and we'll be continuing to look at additional schools that require support in the coming months and years.
So the $143 million is not new money. So why did you not use it last September when the students and the teachers needed help with the, the struggle that they had?
So this is new money that is going into our school divisions as soon as we're able to get the dollars out the door here. And of course, it's important for us that we take a data-driven approach. We didn't have a strong line of sight, of course, into the nature of complexity affecting our schools, and that's why in November, I directed school authorities to assist us in collecting the data, and once we were able to receive that data, we were able to analyze it and determine which schools, which school divisions required the most support, and then we're able to distribute the dollars in that fashion.
Thank you. We'll go to our next at the mic.
Thanks for taking questions. To both the Minister and Premier, can you both tell me if you have signed the separation petition that's been circulating around the province? Kind of looking for a yes or no, and then a why or why not.
No, and I haven't signed any of the petitions, because I believe a citizen-initiated process is meant for citizens. And so I'm watching all of the petition campaigns that are out there, and if any of them get the requisite number of signatures, then we'll have to talk about prioritizing when we would have a referendum on them.
Yeah, same. I also have not signed any petitions at all.
Awesome. Just an unrelated follow-up for the Premier. Premier Smith, you've said you've been threatening to withhold provincial funding for newly appointed judges and saying it's a negotiating position. But Minister Sean Fraser, the federal minister, has been clear the feds won't backstop this funding. Could you please explain why you think it's a good negotiating position to threaten the prospect of decreasing access to courts and to justice? Why threaten Albertans, including the victims of crime, with less access to courts and justice?
Well, it's a matter of reprioritizing resources. That we have an opportunity to appoint judges as well as masters that can do a lot of the work of King's Bench. And so we just want the same kind of respect that Quebec has. Quebec has a joint committee with equal members that appoint to the Supreme Court. We've been in talks with them about whether they would also like to see that same approach applied to the higher court levels. And I can tell you that there are a lot of premiers who think that that's a good idea. I don't know why anyone would think that, especially since 80% of the judges or so have been demonstrated to have Liberal Party donations, I don't know why anyone would think that the process that we have right now is free of politics. I think it would actually be more free of politics if you ended up with having 2 representatives from the federal government, 2 from the province in each jurisdiction, so that you can make sure that there aren't any partisan considerations in those appointments.
Thank you. We'll go to our next question at the mic, and then we're going to head over to the phones for our last few questions.
Rick Bell, Postmedia. This is definitely off topic again.
But you're a former teacher. I thought you'd have lots of questions about this.
They were doing this in the 80s in Manitoba when I was there, so I didn't want to break the
Everything old
news
is
to
new
you.
again.
We can always learn. I'm just going to take a trip down memory lane. Your 2 guests will remember this, that at the time that the teachers were sent back to work and there was the deal between them, there was talk about a general strike of unionized and non-unionized workers. There was talks of MLAs dropping like flies. You see MLAs losing their jobs because of the recall process. There was talks of the minister right there standing on stage, having to look for a new job because he would have been thrown out by his riding. And there was massive active talk by teachers and their supporters of quote unquote toppling the government. You probably remember that phrase, toppling the government. The result is a Leger poll a few days ago had the UCP with a 13-point lead and a 6-point increase since the teachers' strike. So the question I have for you is, how do you feel about that? Are you still public enemy number 1 with the teachers, or did there? Why do you think that none of that actually happened? Because we sure gave a lot of ink and broadcast time to it. Why do you think that didn't happen?
Well, I think in some ways, there's been relief. I mean, parents were relieved that their kids were back in school. Kids were relieved that they were back in school. And because the AETA hadn't set aside any money for a strike fund, I think that there were a lot of teachers who were relieved to be back in school and getting a paycheck. I think there's also some relief that we took them seriously. We always knew we had to address complexity. That's why the minister had put the committee together. We knew that we had to get a lot deeper than just having some kind of arbitrary pupil-teacher ratio written into a contract, because as you've seen, we can say we have an average pupil-teacher ratio of 25, but that's not the problem solved. We actually have to now dig deeper and find out how we address the complexity issues. So we always intended to do that. I think it's a shame that the work got delayed because of the labor disruption, but I hope that teachers have some comfort that we heard them and we're acting on it. And I guess we'll see as this rolls out, the kind of difference it makes. And I hope we hear some really positive stories.
So you're putting in this money, this over $100 million.
Yeah.
And I thought I heard you say that in the budget, there'll be additional money for education. No, it doesn't, not the particulars, but just, I don't think you could say that if it's in the budget. I'm not sure.
I can't announce more until the budget has come out.
But can you say, but I think you've already said there's going to be more money than just this 143.
Well, I have to tell you,
And if that's the case, do you think finally, there's going to be a press conference in an hour or two.
Yes.
Do you think finally the Alberta Teachers Association will be happy?
We've had really constructive input from the teachers who have been at our table, and we're very pleased with the feedback that we've gotten, and we're very hopeful that this is going to make a significant difference as it has in other jurisdictions. That said, we know we need to have additional measures for junior high and high school. One of the things that we learned is part of the issue with the K-6 kids is they're in a complex classroom from the minute they start school till the end of the day. Whereas junior high and senior, they move around to different classes. So some of their classes might be fine, and then some of their classes might be complex. That's why it's a little bit, we have to have more of a tailored approach to junior high and high school. We also have a higher capacity potentially for kids in junior high, high school. So there may be some more computer-assisted learning or AI-assisted learning that can assist those kids at the older grades. And if we have issues of aggression and violence, we probably need to have school resource officers at some schools to be able to address that for the older grades as well. Just knowing that kids get bigger and stronger the older that they get. So we know that there's still some work to do in junior and senior high, but it may just look a little bit different than what we've done in K-6.
In the budget, more money than the 140, whatever.
We committed during the negotiating process to hire 3,000 additional teachers and 1,500 additional education assistants. So you can see how these complexity teams are an example of how we're going to get there, but we intend to meet that commitment.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions, and we're going to go to the phones. Operator, could you put through our first caller, please?
Janet French from CBC Edmonton.
Hello. Thanks for taking my question. What specific measures are you going to use to tell if these complexity teams make a difference? Like, how will you know if this has been successful or not?
Yeah, thank you, Janet. So we will be looking at a few different measures, of course, to be able to evaluate the impact of the teachers and the complexity teams. So we will be looking, we will be conducting surveys and getting more information from teachers to get their perspective of how the complexity teams have assisted relieving some of their workload or addressing some of the complexity issues. We will also be looking at more quantifiable type of data. So for example, the number of interventions that the complexity team has conducted, the number of disruptions in a classroom or in a school setting. So we will be looking at both qualitative and quantitative information to assess the effectiveness and success of the teams.
Okay, for follow-up, educational assistants are already in really short supply, and the timelines we heard at the technical briefing are like government's hoping that school boards could try and hire folks this school year, maybe not all of them. Where are you going to find 960 educational assistants?
Yes, so again, school boards are responsible for hiring and staffing. Of course, we we are hopeful and remain optimistic that school boards will be able to hire the teachers and the additional educational assistants that we've outlined as part of these complexity teams. And we're happy to work with them to see how we can help and support and assist them along the way. But those final determinations and decisions rest with the school authorities to manage.
Do you want to see it?
Yeah, I was going to ask, I don't know, Lynette or to see if you have any more information about, employment hiring practices or how you might undertake this challenge. Sure.
Well, I can say that active recruitment is ongoing, I'm sure across the province, certainly in our division, and we work closely with our Human Resources Department. And there are opportunities to invite EAs for training and supporting them in that regard. So it is ongoing. We know it's a challenge, but it is something that our Human Resources team is actively working on at this time.
Thanks, and thank you, Janet. We have time for one last question today. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Rahim Mohammed from the National Post.
Hi, another off-topic question about the Tumbler Ridge school shooting. Obviously, details are still emerging, but one thing that has been confirmed by the police is that the perpetrator, the 18-year-old perpetrator, had begun the process of medically changing gender 6 years ago as a preteen. Do the details that have emerged so far from this horrific situation and a few recent mass shooting incidents in the States, do they support Alberta's approach of phasing out medical transitions for children identifying as transgender and instead wrapping up counseling and social supports for those children?
Well, I guess today we're all thinking about the victims of this horrific crime. And I don't know that the families are interested in having a speculation about policy at the moment. What I would say is that we do a lot of work on supporting mental health issues, especially all the way in our schools with our CASA classrooms, and making sure that you've got early intervention when somebody is clearly in mental distress. And having early signs of mental distress is vitally important to make sure things don't escalate. But I think that today, we're all just thinking about the families of the victims.
And
as a quick follow-up, when these policies were announced last February, there was also the announcement of a forthcoming counseling pilot that I presume would include the schools, focusing on those children identifying as transgender and their families, and facilitating complicated, challenging discussions among those people. Can you give us an update of where that pilot is in terms of its development, and when we can expect to see it rolled out to schools and other youth-focused fora?
Yeah, the Minister, Nicolaides, and Minister Wilson were going to do a press conference yesterday on updating on our CASA classrooms and some of those initiatives. But out of respect for the family and the families in the tragedy, we have deferred that announcement. I'll maybe turn it over to Minister Nicolaides to see if he can give a bit more information about when that announcement might be rescheduled, and then you'll be able to ask Minister Rick Wilson some of the more detailed questions about the different parts of the program he's rolling out.
Yeah, thank you, Premier. We don't have an exact date and time yet on the rescheduling of that announcement that we were scheduled to do yesterday, so please stay tuned for that. But I did want to add as well that, of course, we do take the mental health and well-being of our students incredibly seriously, and it's part of the reason why in December we created for the first time the Permanent Mental Health and Well-being Student Support Grant. And we've provided $69 million in this budget cycle to support school divisions in providing mental health services and supports to students. And of course, there's a lot of flexibility associated with that so that school divisions are able to deliver programming and hire mental health professionals as is needed in their respective school divisions and jurisdictions.
thanks, Rahim, and that's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.